Okay, I want to talk a little bit about Braden's diet and the regression that's now taking place because of his father's feeding him food that he's allergic to. There is a diet called the GFCF diet. It's gluten and casein free, which is basically breads and pastas and all dairy. Um, Lots and lots of people have lactose intolerance and sensitivities to dairy, and actually gluten is a pretty common allergen in the human species. Um, Specifically with Braden, it's gluten and casein metabolize into opiates. They create an opiate effect in his brain. It breaks through the blood-brain barrier, and it actually causes him to have hallucinations. Um, it has a profound neurological effect on him when he eats the wrong food. Uh, Braden can go from a perfectly normal little boy to a child that is obsessively spinning a piece of string or a toy, or he'll even get coat hangers and he'll put the hook part around one of his fingers and spin it like this so much that he will rub the skin off of his finger. It is an absolute obsession. And it's what's called a stem, which I've explained at the top of this page. Um, Braden has been on a gluten and casein free diet since he was 5 years old. Uh, I have been trying a lot of different things with him to try to help address the symptoms that he was displaying, the issues that he was having, his tics and things. And through my research, I've discovered that a diet has a considerable impact on kids like Braden. So I tried a couple of different things, took sugar out of his diet, took the yeast out, and had some nystatin prescribed for him, which actually kills overgrowth of bad yeast in your intestines. And actually what happens with that is when the yeast begins to die, the kids will actually have uh, sort of an adverse reaction for the first 72 hours or so after the yeast begins to die, because when the yeast starts to die, it emits chemicals into your body that actually tell your brain that you want particular types of foods that those yeast live on. It actually gives you this incredible craving for, say, soy. That's one of the big things, and bread is another big thing that yeast lives on. So you'll just have this insatiable urge to eat these foods because that yeast is dying in your stomach, and it's trying to survive, and it's telling your brain that, oh no, you need this food. So anyway, I was able to kill all the yeast in his stomach, and along with that came a much better digestive tract. He had a lot of problems with going to the bathroom, and once the yeast was out, he didn't have those problems anymore. He went to the bathroom regularly, and everything was pretty consistent. And he didn't have a problem with rashes anymore. He used to get these horrible, horrible rashes where his skin would just bleed. It would just be swollen and red, and it would just crack and break and just bleed all in the cracks, and it was horrible. And he was suffering. He couldn't walk or sit down, or you couldn't wash it, you couldn't put creams on it. There was nothing that brought relief, and it ended up being that it was yeast infections. It wasn't just like a diaper rash, it was a yeast infection. So getting all that bad yeast out was a great starting ground for us. So he did well with that, responded well. So then I started trying some other things with his diet, removing different things step by step in stages so I could see how he was reacting physically, mentally, emotionally to having particular things removed from his diet. And it ended up that I took the gluten and the casein and the foods that would be feeding that bad yeast. Now, he did not go easily into this because Braden was addicted to the opiate effect from the gluten and the casein. So he didn't go gently into the transition over to GFCF. But once I got him going on it, it was like a fog lifted. He stopped lining up toys, and he stopped spinning objects. He stopped drooling on himself, and he was a drooler. He had tics. He had verbal tics where he'd make a sound like over and over. He could do that for hours. He would every second. I mean, literally, I drove in the car with him one time for 7 hours, and he did that nearly the entire 7 hours. So his diet got rid of all of that. So for me, that's the evidence. That's all the evidence that I needed. Try it. It makes him better. It works. So he stayed on that diet for a year and a half, and then we went and had this temporary hearing, and I had a feeling that his dad would start feeding him ridiculous things. When Braden was an infant, I became a full vegetarian. I had not eaten red meat since I was 10 years old, and I almost died. The only reason I continued to eat meat during my pregnancy was because of pressure from, frankly, uneducated people who thought that I was harming my child by not eating meat, which is quite the contrary. You take a lot of risks when you eat factory farmed meat and you put that in your body. It's disgusting. So anyway, I allowed Braden to eat some chicken, turkey, and things like that, and never let him eat red meat. I didn't like him to eat chicken because I was scared of salmonella, and when he was 3 years old, he ended up contracting salmonella. He had to be hospitalized. It was very scary. He was in the hospital for a couple of days, and he was so tiny with an IV stuck into his arm and a little board tied to it, and he was extremely autistic. So then there's the issue of trying to keep him from ripping the tubes out of his arms, and it's just an added, it's crazy. So he had not eaten gluten or casein since he was 5 years old, and I took him off of chicken and all other meats when he was 3, when he had the salmonella. So my son had been a vegetarian since he was 3. He had never eaten red meat in his entire life, and he was on the GFCF diet at the time of the temporary hearing in February of 2009. And I went to have lunch. Well, prior to having lunch with my son, I can see the regression in him. When he eats the wrong food, he's a different person. People describe autism as, they're in their own world. He goes right back into that world when he eats the wrong food. Something as simple as taking a bite of a piece of bread can offset everything. For days, he will react to the wrong food that got in his system. And it's very noticeable. It's very noticeable. And right away, I can tell exactly what it is that he has gotten into the wrong food. And his dad could even tell that when we were living together. He watched him when he would get a hold of something. We both watched him. I remember discussing it with him. Yet his dad has decided to feed him cheeseburgers, which is gluten, casein, and red meat. And he's doing that just to spite me because he knows it'll upset me. But he doesn't consider the consequences that it has